Yeah, thank you, Charles, for the introduction and for getting this together, for us to be able to share our information for such a worthy cause. I hope everybody is well out there. And what I'll cover today is just a quick reflection over the past 10 years in the field, not only myself as a practitioner, but also kind of touch on what we potentially could hope for in the next 10 years. And I say could because there's a lot of things in our current reality that we definitely want to identify and try to make better. If we want to achieve what we want to achieve in the next 10 years, we have to address these things in the present. And I'll spend most of my time after that just talking about what I learned at these different stops along the way, how I continued to progress in my career, why I left the places I left, what are the lessons I learned at each spot. And just looking back at the past 10 years, obviously there's been a tremendous amount of growth. There's no better time to be in the field. You have opportunities at all levels, whether you're talking about high school, college, pro, performance training centers, domestic and abroad, research, working with, sports nutrition companies. There's something for everybody, which is great. You've got specialized groups and organizations domestically and abroad that are advocating for the growth of sports nutritionists. And there's been an increased sports nutrition emphasis in academics. I know when I was taking classes, 16, 17 years ago, there wasn't a single sports nutrition one, but now students can actually get their hands on some theory and practice, instead of having to wait until after they graduate. And you have highly integrated practitioners all across the globe. You have sports dietitians and nutritionists that are considered pretty highly regarded in their sports performance staff, along the same lines of a strength coach or an athletic trainer. Now, where could we be, or where do we want to be over the next 10 years? And obviously, getting a chance to have at least some full integration at every level. Hopefully every professional team, domestic and abroad, would have a nutritionist or dietitian, hopefully full-time, and having that role maximized to where that person can really take a program and run with it instead of getting, pigeonholed into just doing a lot of the day-to-day, smoothie making, running the fueling station, that kind of thing. If you're a competent practitioner and you have experience, having the ability to go anywhere on the globe and thrive, whether putting together a program from the ground up, whether you come to the United States or you head abroad, or just transitioning and creating a program based on what's already there in the eyes of what an organization would want. And the hope would be for us to be considered on the same level as strength and conditioning coaches and athletic trainers, especially when they're the key stakeholders with a lot of professional teams domestically. Being able to have full financial support and resource support, not only in terms of salaries, but the appropriate number of people on staff and also the appropriate resources and facilities. Continued collaboration across the globe. I mean, this is a great start. There's so many amazing practitioners and researchers that, we don't really know about domestically, and vice versa. This is a great opportunity for us to learn collectively. And then just having adequate resources and support for learning and growth, which means that if you're a student or if you're a first year, third year, fifth, 10th year within your practice, if there's something you want to learn about, you can find a module, you can find somebody to turn to learn. But like I said, before we start thinking about where we're going to go in 10 years, we really have to kind of identify where we're currently at. And we definitely have a lot of work to do. And this is from having conversations with colleagues in the field, with, bosses that I've had, with a lot of different people, whether it's head coaches, head college coaches, GMs, assistant GMs, ADs, strength and conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, trying to just gauge what are their perceptions of dietitians and nutritionists based on what they've experienced, what some of their colleagues have experienced. And again, we have a lot of work to do, and there's a variety of reasons for this. And one is there's no benchmarking for the role. I mean, there's no one particular document that states this is exactly what a sports dietitian and nutritionist needs to do. So, if you're entry level or you've been doing things a certain way, you don't necessarily know what you could potentially end up doing because we haven't identified how to maximize the full skill set of an RD or nutritionist. And then just looking at the perception of the role, when I talked about all these different people that I've had conversations with over the past 4 or 5 years, and there are a lot of great practitioners across the globe, which is great. But at the same time, just like with any field, you've got a lot of practitioners that are struggling and are not maximizing what they can do in their roles. And the important thing is just to be able to understand that and know that there's a lot of work still to be done. Like, we want to be considered a professional along the lines of strength and conditioning and athletic trainers. We don't want to get pigeonholed in these positions where we just end up working and being looked at as the person who works in food service or puts food out on the table. Obviously, that's part of the role, but that's not really what's going to help us get to where we want to be. If we want those bigger salaries, if we want a higher stake at the table, like strength and conditioning and athletic trainers, if we don't want to lose out on jobs to organizations hiring sports scientists and analytic people instead of investing in dietitians. I think that's really important for us to just identify what are we doing now and how can we get better with that. Another is just sometimes we get so narrow-minded and we get caught up in groupthink because we've been taught things a certain way. We don't necessarily respect the opinions and points of view for others outside of the field, whether it's academics, whether it's researchers, people that can bring other points of view to the table. I think that's really important. We get caught up in the same type of terminology, and we really need to get over this. That's something that's going to help us progress as a group. Now, looking at growth and career advancement, like these organizations have done a good job advocating, but right now the field is very saturated. There's tons of opportunity, but you just don't have the quality level of practitioner to meet the needs of what organizations are looking for. So they're just hiring the first person that can come cheap. And unfortunately, that's a reality that happens in every field, but that's not what's going to continue to show what dietitians and nutritionists can do. Instead of having integrated practitioners who can really take a role and grow with it, you get caught up with these people that are just fucking staying behind the fueling station, cranking out smoothies. They don't necessarily know how to grow in their job, whether they've been taught by somebody who that's what had the way they've always done it and not looked at any type of particular career growth. And in terms of, hiring practices, again, it's the same thing that happens in strength and conditioning and athletic training. You don't necessarily have a diverse group of applicants. It's, well, I need some names. Let me contact somebody to get some names. A little bit of it is a trust issue. You don't want to make a bad hire, so you trust the people that you feel comfortable with, whether they're your colleagues or people in the business. Or it's a little bit of laziness. You don't necessarily want to do a full search to try to find. I think we need to continue to improve on that. Another is in terms of continuing education and learning, what certifications are available, what conferences. There's not a lot out there. We have the CSSD domestically. It's fucking terrible. It's horrible. I'm going to say that right now. It was a good idea to think of it at the time, but it's not going to allow you to differentiate between the quality of practitioner. So I have mine. So the level that I practice at isn't going to be the same as somebody else that just got theirs that's never actually worked with an athlete. And it's the same thing with the CSCS. In terms of conferences, the annual ones we have, they're great networking events, but are they actually providing value to where people are actually learning things? Or is it the same thing that strength and conditioning and athletic trainers are going through with NSCA and NATA, where we just go show up, get CEUs, don't learn anything, and then just have a merry good time? Another issue is you've got a lot of practitioners with limited range because people are trying to just get their foot in the door really quickly and not develop a whole skill set of what they can bring to the table. So you're an intern, you get your first job and you just focus on nutrition, and then you get pigeonholed in these roles. So you don't necessarily know anything about exercise physiology, strength and conditioning, athletic medicine, recovery, sleep, because that's what's going to help you expand what you can do in your job and help set you up for getting jobs in the future of what you exactly want. And then practitioner struggles. And the truth is, practitioners all across the globe are struggling. I've struggled in my past roles. I struggle with stuff now. I think just being able to identify the things that people are struggling with and having an outlet for them to communicate to other people or figuring out what's going on and trying to come up with solutions for that. I think that's really important because everybody struggles. We need to identify these struggles sooner than later. And last is missed opportunities. And by this, what I mean is when you get caught up in groupthink and you're just stuck on doing this narrow-minded job and you're not reaching out to people outside of just the athletes you work with, whether it's coaches, strength coaches, the equipment staff, operations, whoever, that's a missed opportunity because these people, you're not only trying to create buy-in with your athletes, but you need to create buy-in with the people around you because they're going to be advocates for you. They're going to help set you up for your next job, or they're going to help create, more growth with what you're doing currently. And you see things from different perspectives when you start communicating and understanding, what's going on with the strength staff, what's going on with the medical staff, what's going on with the equipment staff, because they struggle too. And when you build those bridges, you just have that much better of a work environment. So these are things that I've kind of identified right now that we can continue to work on and grow. And that's really going to help us set up for where we could potentially be over the next 10 years. Now, in terms of, lessons learned, if you were to look at my resume, this is what it kind of shapes out to be. And so with that, I'll say that I've had a lot of different experiences, and this is what I would highly recommend to every practitioner out there, regardless of where you're at. Don't just aim to work in the NFL and want that to be your only job. when I first started, I had no clue I'd end up working in the NFL. That wasn't even a thought of mine. I just wanted to, use nutrition as an advantage and help people around me. And if I hadn't gone through the things that I'd gone through previously, I would have never ended up in the NFL. And really, I know people are worried about, pay and work and all that stuff. So my first 3 years from 2009, 10, and 11, was a volunteer intern. I worked at K-State. I did all that for free. I didn't get paid a dime for any of that shit. So when people talk, or interns talk about, oh, I'm worried about getting paid, sometimes you just have to do what you need to do to get experience, to get your foot in the door. And what I'll do here is I'll highlight, my responsibilities with each role that I had at each place, talk about things I learned, talk about things I struggle with, but also why I ended up leaving that place. And I think it's important when you're talking to practitioners to not just hear about, their successes, because that's few and far between. If people don't talk about their struggles and or the things they learned, then that's not somebody you really want to talk to or learn from. And I think we need a little bit more of that, across the globe. Now, K-State, I was a graduate teacher and a graduate research assistant. This is where I started developing range. And by that, I was taking classes, teaching, helping others with research projects, doing my own research, running a life fitness program, coaching, weightlifting, Westside barbell methodology, 5-3-1, getting my hand in a lot of different things, which is really important. I didn't know it at the time, but that was really going to set myself up for my career moving forward. Now, another thing I learned when I was at K-State is perception is reality. And this hit home really hard. Halfway through my first semester teaching, I got my teacher evaluations back. And, when I was going through this program, I was, just going with the flow. I thought I was the shit. I was going to finish in 2 years, get my degree, and then, I'd have a chance to, work with whatever school or situation came my way. But the reality is those T-vals brought me back down to earth. And the students were harsh, but they were true. So I didn't think of myself in that light, but it was important because that got back to the department heads. They brought me in for a meeting and they're like, what the fuck are you doing? You haven't signed on to help out with research projects. Your T-vals are horrible. You better shape up or we're just going to let you go and we'll figure out how to bring in somebody else for the next year. So that's important, getting a chance to step outside of yourself and take that feedback and criticism. And this plays a role with every step I've been along my career. And this is also feedback you guys definitely want to try to get to as consistently as possible, because if I didn't get that, then I probably would have been out of the program. And, because I had that feedback, I was able to transition, help out with research projects, start my own master's thesis, and my T-vals got significantly better to the point where I had the best ones for the remaining 3 semesters in the department. Now, outside of the teaching and the research, I wanted to work with athletes there, so I reached out to a bunch of different sports, but no one was really taking, and I ended up going to a presentation by the men's basketball strength coach. He presented his programming, took people through workouts, had a Q&A session. There's like 100 people in this room, so I just straight up asked him, this is my only chance to do it. And I said, what are your thoughts on nutrition? Do you have anybody helping you out, and can I help you out? And luckily he said, yeah, but I can't pay you. I said, that's fine. I need some experience. And this is where I had the opportunity to kind of gain some experience figuring out what athletes are like. You have the background in theory and knowledge and all that, but if you're not working with athletes and getting a chance to tailor that information to them, it doesn't mean anything. Because the reality of it is the mindset of a college athlete, they give 2 shits about nutrition. Now, I worked with some of the guys that were red flagged. They needed to gain weight, lose weight, talking about body comp, doing recovery stuff, this and that. I'd have good sessions with them. They nod their head. They could regurgitate the information I was teaching them. But the second they were out the door, they were stopping at McDonald's, going to eat chicken fingers at the calf. So when people say athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, that's actually bad advice. That's not true. Athletes don't care until you show them you can relate to them and you understand what they're going through. And this is one of the first things I learned working, because they weren't listening to anything that I was saying, and it was tough. But I needed to figure out a way to communicate to them for them to understand it. Now, all these experiences were great. I developed a good amount of range, until the end of my tenure at Kansas State, which opened up the door to opportunities to apply for some college jobs. Now, I didn't have a mentor teach me through this. I didn't come from a big name school with the great sports nutrition program, but I had some potential. And because I had that potential, I was able to land a job at Michigan State. Michigan State, my role is kind of similar to Kansas State, where I was a contract dietitian working with the MSU athletes. I was helping with research projects. I was teaching, and I was also coaching and doing some speed work, doing some resistance training with youth athletes across Michigan. And the unfortunate thing is, I didn't necessarily know what I was getting into when I got to Michigan State. The situation wasn't great. The group that was providing nutrition services was trying to mend this relationship with athletics because it was a contract situation. And that's where I came in. And so the 3 seasons that I spent there was really helpful in kind of just honing myself, because I had to develop a mindset. And this isn't necessarily talking about direct growth. This is, you're going to be put through the ringer. There's going to be high expectations. You're going to get yelled at by coaches, strength coaches, ops people. Athletes are going to fight with you, this and that. But if you're tough and you can get through it, then you can develop a really good mindset to take you forward. And that's what I was able to do here, kind of like a David Goggins can't hurt me style, which is really important for me moving forward. And then from this too, I was able to kind of learn from everybody around me. Now, you'll learn a lot of things from a lot of different people. It doesn't matter who it is. You can learn stuff from the custodial staff. You can learn stuff from the video staff, as long as you're open-minded about it. And what I'll say is this: the people that you don't necessarily agree with, or you think that are bad at their job, or you don't necessarily respect, you're going to learn more from them than anybody else, because the stuff they do will kind of piss you off. It'll anger you. It'll put you in a mindset to say, if I was ever in this position, I would do things differently. And it's more of a motivational thing, as opposed to learning from somebody who you highly regard and respect, because more than likely you're going to try to mimic what they do. And that's not exactly what you want to end up doing. So there was a big earn the jersey, provide value connotation with this role. I had to prove that I was the right person to mend this relationship and do everything that was needed. So with that, there wasn't any resources provided, no fancy software. This was build buy-in, gain the trust of the coaches, make sure the players can trust you, because if you're able to do that, you're going to get some more responsibilities. You're going to get more responsibilities. I didn't have an office. I was working out of a laptop and a backpack. And there wasn't anything in terms of, moving product, working with a budget and worrying about any of that catering stuff. It was, you have to use your RD brain to figure out these problems. So there were long consults, there were hour-long consults trying to figure out multiple complex situations, which is important because nowadays we don't necessarily get a chance to do that with all the responsibilities put on our shoulders, but that's really important to go through. And Michigan State definitely learned that life is unfair for a variety of reasons. After my second season there, we made it to the Big Ten championship game and then the Rose Bowl. And I was hoping to be able to be there with the team to help work, but wasn't at the Big Ten championship game. And there was talk that I'd be able to go on the Rose Bowl trip. And it was probably almost a done deal. I convinced myself that I was going to go, to the point where the ops people and the ADs were like, all right, just hold tight. We're going to figure this thing out. And I hadn't heard anything. And basically the night before the team was going to leave, on December 24th, I got I think it was an email from the AD saying, oh shit, I'm sorry you haven't heard this year, but you're not on the trip. And they could have told me that weeks in advance, but waited till the day before the team left. And I was kind of heartbroken. And also, it was too late for me to buy a ticket home to visit my family since I wasn't on the Rose Bowl trip. And this is one of those things where, like Dr. Willing says, tough, good. What are you going to do about it? And from that, I was able to harness that as motivation to say, all right, I still need to continue to prove what I'm able to do in this situation. So next year, if this ever happens again, I will be on the team, on the trip with the team. And you also need to leverage when to pick and choose your battles. Now, there's going to be a time in your career where somebody's going to say something to you, they don't mean it a certain way, but you take it a certain way. Or you're going to say something to somebody, you don't mean it a certain way, but they're going to take it a certain way. And it's not the way it was meant to be said. It's just one of those situations where it's how things are perceived. Now, I was talking to some of the athletes. The football team got training table later on in the evening, so no breakfast. So, we were talking about doing a breakfast for dinner, and the guys were on board, sent it to the caterers, they sent it to the ops person. And we were in the football building, and he comes up to me. He's like, hey, did you put this on the menu? And I said, yeah. He's like, in front of a lot of people, he said, he kind of screamed. He's like, that's a fucking terrible idea. Now, in his head, he was thinking more about the money and not that the players were looking for. And I was kind of taken aback. And I kind of wanted to yell at him right then and there, but I had no authority. I mean, I was his contract dietitian. We could have gotten a really big pissing match, which would have ended up looking really badly for me. But unfortunately, I didn't. He walked off, and I understood after the fact what he meant by it, but it was funny. There were a few players around me, And after he walked off, he said, dude, that was a good idea. Fuck that guy. We don't even like him. So again, choosing your battles is always going to be an important thing. And another thing is standing your ground. Now, I was working with a defensive player, during the second season, in season. He was coming off an injury. He needed to play. He had lost some weight. We were just working on, getting his weight back up. And he was just unhappy at that time, which is okay. And we were going back and forth. And I put together a lot of stuff for him. I was kind of going above and beyond for him. And he just wasn't necessarily having it. So we were sitting and we were talking. And he was just irked. So he grabs, my materials, my backpack, throws it on the ground. And at this point, I kind of snapped. I'm like, what is wrong with this dude? Like, I'm just trying to help him, and he's just not having any of it. Like, what the fuck? And after he throws my stuff on the ground, he looks at me and says, fuck you, Teak. And I kind of lost. So I stood up, looked right in him in his face, and I said, fuck you. Don't touch my shit. You're being a fucking pussy. And he kind of smirked at me. And he's like, you know what? I respect you. So you're going to be put in certain situations with athletes where, they'll test you. And sometimes you have to give. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. And that's always going to be really important. And the last thing I'll say about my time at Michigan State was I had a conversation with an AD. So about, what is my outlook going to be with this organization, with the team moving forward? Because I want to know, am I the person that can continue on and develop this department the way I see fit? And straight up to my face, he said, well, I view sports nutrition like sports psych. It's just a fad and it's going to fade away. And there's going to be people in higher up positions that are going to say things that you don't agree with. And that's okay, because not everybody's going to see things the way you want to. But I knew at that time it was time for me to move on. I kind of learned and maximized what I could have done for the university, and I needed another challenge. So fortunately for me, I was able to get a job at the University of Oregon. So at Michigan State, I worked really closely with the strength conditioning staff, saw everything that they were doing from their perspective. At the University of Oregon, now as the director of sports nutrition, also kind of helping doing some teaching on the side with working in some practicum students. And I was working a lot closer with athletic medicine and sports science, sports performance staff, seeing things from their perspective. And one of the first things my boss told me when I was hired was this: is you don't know what you don't know. So he told me, you're coming into a situation that you don't necessarily know the history of, you don't know the thought process of the people you're going to work with, the coaches, but be very open-minded, because there's so much out there that you're going to want to learn and you're going to try to learn, but you're not going to be able to. And it's so true with everything we do, with what we do in nutrition. We're on this straight and narrow path. We sometimes get really tunnel vision, but we need to understand that there's a whole world out there outside of what we do. Like, nutrition isn't life or death. There's so much more that we can contribute if we take the time to just get out of ourselves and move forward that way. Now, I was now a department head for the first time, working with budgets, doing admin stuff. And it's a, tell you the truth, I didn't do a really good job of leading the department. Instead of providing value as a leader, using influence and leadership, I was kind of using more of my title of authority. Now, there's reasons for it. When you come into a situation where the staff's already there, you kind of have to weigh and see, like, is this staff with me or are they against me? And unfortunately, it wasn't. It was more of the latter, but that's okay. So there are a lot of things that I tried out that didn't necessarily work. I'll say you want a master's in failure and a PhD in learning, and being able to take these things and have the autonomy to do it myself was really important, because I was able to learn all these things on my own. No one really had to, grab my hand and take me and show me and tell me what was going to happen. It was better I learned it myself. Now, and whether you're in a situation when a new boss comes in, or you're the new boss and you have a staff underneath you, it doesn't matter what happened before. It's all about what the boss wants. So I was hired to frame the department and what I thought was best moving forward for those athletes. And if people aren't with you, then they either have to, shape up or ship out. And it's the same thing if there's a new head coach and there's a star player, that player has to conform to what the coach wants. And it's the same thing that happened after my second year. So the director of performance was now my boss, and it didn't matter any of the plans that I had before. If he wanted to change it up, then that was on him, because that's how he wanted the department to continue to grow and what he wanted it shaped as. I think that's an important thing to know, because again, the higher up you go on the organizational chart, the harder it is to fill those positions. The lower you go down the organizational chart, the easier it is to fill those positions. So it was one thing I had to take into consideration. Another thing I had to learn really quickly was finding my purpose as a practitioner. And because I brought so much with me from Michigan State, I wanted to do a ton of stuff and prove myself because I was kind of pigeonholed in that previous role. So now I had the keys to a proverbial Ferrari. And I think, being a part of teams that had a lot of success, in my first year we went to the national championship game, I thought that I would only be successful if we ended up winning a national championship, which is kind of hilarious because I had zero control over that as, the person supplying, and managing the nutrition program. And this happens quite a lot. When you're a part of a team or an organization that has a lot of success, it's kind of get easy to get lost in the sauce and think you're more important and better than you really are, as opposed to if you're continuously losing and you're held to the fire where you have to adapt and grow and get better and prove that you should stay, then that makes you that much more of it makes you better if you continue to evaluate yourself. But I got lost in getting caught up in only finding success based on the team success. So after the third year there, when we went 4-8 and the whole coaching staff got fired, I kind of hit rock bottom just in my thought process. There was a hiring freeze. I wasn't able to implement the staffing program that I wanted. I had a new boss that had a different idea of where this could go. And unfortunately, I just wasn't in the right mind frame, but I had to take a step back and kind of just figure out what exactly is it that I want to be known for? What is my legacy? Is it all about winning, or is it more about, what can I do for the people around me, whether it's, the students, whether it's my staff, whether it's, the athletes, the people around me. I think that was really important for me to find out. And I wouldn't have done that if we wouldn't have gone through, a couple bad seasons there. And the next thing I'll say is, try not to be a martyr in your role. And I was this for a year and a half, 2 years, where I felt that if I was the first person in, last person out doing all this work, then everybody would see that, oh, this person works really hard. He should get what he needs based on what his staffing plan is. But again, every program, every department has issues that they're dealing with, that they don't like or they do like. And you definitely don't want to just sink yourself and put all of your eggs in that basket. And that's what I ended up doing. It wasn't the right thing to do, but I ended up learning that after then. It was important for me to just kind of take a step back and realize that, life isn't work, work isn't life. You need to have at least some resemblance of balance. And I had a good amount of balance in Michigan State because I had a good social system. And I didn't necessarily have that at Oregon because I put so much stock into the job instead of just thinking, all right, well, how can I actually just contribute and provide value instead of proving it? And I think it's important to develop a support system wherever you're at. When I was working in the Pac-12 there, all of us Pac-12 RDs were a tight-knit group. We would vent to each other. We'd share ideas. We'd meet as a group. We still talk to this day, which is important because you're going to need a support system, whether it's people in the field or outside of the field. I think the last thing to think about is just honestly assess yourself. So I was able to ask my new boss, colleagues, staff, what areas can I continue to improve upon and get better as a practitioner? And they were very, honest and forthright. And I think that information was very valuable because it allowed me to figure out what is it that I want to achieve, moving forward in my career. And from that, I was able to guide, I think I'm ready to take the next step because I've had all these experiences, sports science, working with medical, developing my own program, staffing, hiring, creating policies and protocols, everything from before. And I wanted to try my hand at the NFL. And with that, I didn't want to just get a regular old job. I wanted to be challenged. And I'd heard that the Giants were looking for not only a dietitian, but a strength coach too. So reached out to them, was fortunate enough to, get an interview and actually ended up getting hired, which was great because that's the role I wanted. And what I'll say about this is the NFL definitely is a business. We're looking for the best players. We're looking for the best coaches. We're looking for the best staff. So you legitimately, your job's on the line every single day, especially when you don't win. And we haven't won shit. I don't know what it's like to be a part of a winning team in the NFL, which kind of sucks. But you do have a lot of stakeholders that have been in an organization for 15, 25, 30, 40 years. And a lot of people don't like change. And it's the same with a lot of organizations, a lot of professional organizations. It's hard to really get through to them to get things to change the way you want them to. So you have to pander and you have to slowly play this political game with everybody, which is okay. That's just the nature of the beast. Now with that, there's a lot of walls that are put up with these people that, they've been there for their life. They don't like change. They're very ingrained in the culture of the organization, which also means you got to have a poker face when you're working with these people. Now, players are going to talk, coaches are going to talk, staff's going to talk. There's a lot of back channeling, which you need to do is just kind of not listen to any of it and focus on what you need to do to be successful for the players, because it is a players league. It is a players game. And with that, the most important thing is building buy-in with the players, not only the staff, but most importantly with the players. That's number one, because you only have a short amount of time with them, and you have to prove to them that they should listen to you, because there's so many gurus out there. They have so many people in their ear. They've got a lot of money. If you're not able to provide value with the time you have with them, then you're not really going to stick around very long, especially if you have a position where it's outside of food service. You're really integrated with the team. So that means don't chase rabbits. So don't try to do what this other team is doing, what that other team is doing. You got to do what's best for your own players. And you've got to be able to connect the dots between every one of the support staff and coaches that are in there. What can nutrition do to help out with medical, with strength and conditioning, with data management, with all these different metrics that we're gathering? And how can I communicate this to the players? The players don't give a shit how many degrees you have, where you've worked. They want to know, can you help them extend their careers and help them get money? And you guys have seen, The Last Dance with Michael Jordan and the Bulls. You know how this is how players act. Nutrition's not going to make or break a team. The best strength program won't really do shit if players aren't bought in, and if they're soft and they have horrible mentality. You're not going to win games. That's the unfortunate reality. And I think the main thing, I'll kind of finish with this, and I only have 1 minute left, is you've got to continue to challenge yourself. You want to be a lifelong learner. Continue to read, continue to look outside the field, because now you should know the theory. You have to figure out what are different ways you can reach these athletes, and figure out ways that they learn, because all of them learn differently. All of communication styles are going to be different. They all have different needs. And to be able to do that, you have to evaluate yourself constantly. So my first boss, when I was there, who hired me, when he was doing my initial evaluation, he said, hey, the way I want to look at this is, if our jobs are online every single year, and I'm going to evaluate you, do you provide a benefit and an advantage to the team that anybody else doesn't? If you were going to try to apply for your job again, would we hire you again? And that's the way I've continued to work, because again, my bags have been packed every single year at the end of the year for the last 3 years. I thought I was going to get fired every year for the last 3 years. It just so happens that doing all these different things has kind of made me a little, not indispensable, but harder to replace, as opposed to somebody else that didn't necessarily have the range or the skill that I bring to the table. I know time's almost up, so I'll finish out with this really quickly. Where do we go from here? Now, outside of the stuff that I just mentioned, I think we still need to continue to address the issues and struggles we have as a field, more collaboration worldwide. So stuff like this is going to be really important. We definitely do need to start benchmarking the role and create appropriate learning content and experiences. And I'll finish by saying this. The theory and the knowledge is really important, but the application to be able to identify what your athletes struggle with, how do you communicate to them, what's important to them, relating to them, is even more important. That's what's going to help you develop those relationships and the buy-in with the players, not only them, but the staff. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but if you guys have any specific questions, just follow me on LinkedIn. Send me those questions. I'll respond to you directly, or I'll create videos to be able to take care of that. I'll hand it over to Charles right now.